August 14, 1943. The war could be over this week. It really could, if everybody just stopped killing each other. I know that's terribly naive, even silly, but the fact is that in mid-August 1943, it looks like more and more people are feeling it that way. Heck, this week, German propaganda even stops working on the German people. Like totally. And yet the killing, the war, rolls on. Before we start today's program, here's a word from the Time Ghost Army.
Never forget. Never give up. Never surrender. Join the Time Ghost Army.
This is War Against Humanity, a series of World War II in real time. I'm Spartacus Olsson. Last week, the British government decided to not aid the starving in Bengal, British India. Burma gained ostensible independence, but remained a Japanese puppet state for exploitation. In Germany, the SS-administered slave labor activities were expanded. In the death factory Treblinka, hundreds of prisoner workers rebelled, with over 100 escaping to become the only survivors of the camp's 900,000 victims. In Berlin, Reichspropaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels announced the evacuation of Berlin and other cities, causing confusion and panic among the population. This week, on August 12th, the SS reports a complete breakdown of German propaganda. Recent events simply don't match up with what has been pumped out by the Nazi communication machinery. There are constant tales of victories to come, the lauding of the racially, mentally, and physically superior Wehrmacht soldier, the incessant promise of vengeance on the British for bombing Germany, the fantasies of an ideologically corrupt, Jewish-dominated, ailing U.S. capitalist economy, and the weakness of the purported Slav Untermensch in the socialist Jewish Bolshevik conspiracy have not stood the test of the actual war. The SS now report that in hindsight, most Germans see the entry into the war by the US as the beginning of the end for Germany. To the public, it seems clear that the idea of a Bewegungskrieg, a mobile war, colloquially Blitzkrieg, was a pipe dream that has been replaced by the harsh reality of a war on attrition based on material superiority and the number of soldiers you can put into the field. According to the SS, the general opinion is now that the war has entered into some kind of stalemate as the First World War, but in a situation where Germany is even more outnumbered, outgunned, and alone than in 1918. The SS report claims that literally no one believes the German press anymore, that the calls for the truth are ever growing, and that Germans have abandoned German media as a source of news, now only relying on the grapevine and foreign radio stations. They go on to list the events that have tipped the scales. The failure to break through at Kursk and abandoning the Orel salient. The fall of Sicily and beginning of aerial operations over the Italian mainland. The fall of Mussolini's fascist government in Italy. The cancellation by neutral Sweden of Germany's permission for troop transits. The bombing of the Ruhr and firestorm in Hamburg. The announcement of evacuation of German cities. The lack of equal revenge bombing on the British Isles. While the SS does report a rise in criticism of the Nazi regime and that more and more Germans dare to openly defy the idea that Nazism is the best alternative for Germany, they still report that a majority of the people stand resolute behind the Führer and the desire to win the war, if that is still possible. The question on the mind of the people is if there can be equal retribution for the bombing of German cities. If that can happen, although many doubt that it can, they believe that the Reich stands a fighting chance. If anything, this week shows the contrary when Arthur Harris, at the head of RAF Bomber Command, predicts that the Allied bombers will knock Germany stiff based on his success at Hamburg 2 weeks ago. By now, some of the more skeptic allies in the US military even think that under this kind of pressure, Germany will have to surrender by Christmas. So, the bombings continue with a run on Mannheim in the night of August 9th by 457 aircraft, destroying 1,316 buildings, including 41 industrial sites, injuring 1,210 and killing 269. The next night, Nuremberg is bombed by 653 aircraft, killing 577 people. During the day on August 12th, 133 US B-17 Flying Fortresses bombed Bochum in the Ruhr area, but 17% of the attacking force is shot down. Harris is now confident that if he can get 40,000 tons of bombs in good weather, he can wipe Berlin off the map and convince the Germans to abandon Nazism and surrender. But even if he could divert that much ordnance from the rest of the war, his prediction doesn't quite fit with what the SS report about German youth's faithfulness to the Nazi cause and the war despite the bombardment. Although the mood in Germany is miserable and no one believes the propaganda anymore, the SS takes some relief in that the number of men and women reaching legal age who join the Nazi Party has not declined, although they lament that most new members only do it because it's the right thing to do and display little ideological enthusiasm, and that more than ever, many youth are not just ignoring the invitation to join, but actively refusing party membership in defiance. Among young men over 16, the majority see the Wehrmacht as their chosen path to serve the country, and there are more young men seeking to become career officers than ever before. And while the German Nazi regime mulls over how to win back their people's faith under a rain of bombs, the subjects of Great Britain and Bengal feel the effect of abandonment where there is no rain of any kind. Referring to the situation there as a famine is officially prohibited under emergency rules. But whatever you call it, it's clear to anyone and everyone in the region what's going on, and ignoring it won't solve the problem. But that is what the influential newspaper, The Statesman, accuses the government of trying to do on August 8th when they note that the local governments willed themselves into believing that the dread spectacle would vanish. The cities are now crowded with starving people. Hundreds of bodies are found in the streets of Calcutta on a weekly basis. The suffering in the countryside is even worse, although poorly documented. And as always, with famine comes disease. Cholera has been epidemic for 2 months now, and the reports of typhoid are rising rapidly. And while the British colonial government is firmly decided to do nothing, the new Italian government is undecided if they shall do something: surrender. Despite Mussolini's removal to immediately get Italy out of the war, more than 2 weeks later, the country is still technically in the war. In the first weeks of August, the British have now dropped 3 million leaflets suggesting that this will lead to more iron and fire. This week, United Nations Allied bombing resumes. On August 7th and 12th, the RAF bombed Turin with close to 450 tons of bombs, hitting the Fiat industrial plants, a couple of infrastructure hubs in addition to civilian areas, churches, a theater, and a hospital. The city has, however, been largely evacuated, with only 1/3 of the population, mostly essential workers, remaining, so casualties are limited to several dozen wounded and 40 dead. The same night, 504 bombers dropped 1,252 tons of explosives and incendiary bombs on Milan, causing massive fires, just short of becoming a firestorm. Here, only 250,000 of the 1.15 million inhabitants have fled, and around 700 people are killed. The next day, the U.S. Army Air Force raided railway hubs at San Lorenzo and Vittorio, hitting a lot of civilian infrastructure on top of the military targets they ostensibly aimed for. When Pope Pius XII comes to visit the targeted areas, crowds of war-fatigued Italians greet him, shouting, "Long live peace!" Rome is not bombed this week, but not because the Badoglio regime has proposed making Rome an open city, which they have, but because it's just not on the target list right now. The British War Cabinet has, however, decided that Rome remains a legitimate target until the unconditional surrender of Italy. That may indeed be a thing soon to happen. The German regime is preparing for the defensive static war that their population fears. On August 11th, German Führer Adolf Hitler orders the construction of the Panther-Wotan line, a defensive eastern wall running from the Baltic Sea west of Leningrad down to the Pripyat marshes, then largely following the Dnieper River from just west of Smolensk down to the Black Sea, with a turn at the end so that it ends east of Crimea, west of Mariupol. It's the second massive defensive construction project, with the first being the Atlantic Wall, already under construction along the Atlantic Ocean and the North Sea, stretching from France to Norway. The construction of both will be the responsibility of Organisation Todt. headed by Reichsminister for Armaments and War Production Albert Speer. Now, Speer is already struggling to fill the labor force needed to operate all of this. The current mix of paid workers, forced laborers, POW, and other slaves from all over Europe isn't nearly enough. His idea is to press gang another 1 million workers from France, 1 million from Italy, 600,000 from the Baltic states, and 250,000 each from the Netherlands and Belgium, to be added to the 1 million laborers from Germany of undetermined origin. It's an ambitious plan for enslavement, but we will see what shall come of it all in the next months. And while the Germans plan for colonial-style slavery, the U.S. promises to hold true to a guarantee for independence. Following a 1936 Act of Congress, the Philippines, a U.S. territory before the war, has been promised full independence by 1946. Now, on August 12th, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt vows that this will happen sooner. I give the Filipino people my word that the Republic of the Philippines will be established the moment the power of our Japanese enemies is destroyed. When the Filipino people resisted the Japanese invaders with their very lives, they gave final proof that there was a nation fit to be respected as the equal to any on earth, not in size or wealth, but in the stout heart and national dignity, which are the true measures of a people. It's more than a reward for the failed but heroic defense against Japanese invasion. As the Philippines remain under occupation, her people are subject to the plunder, forced labor, exploitation, and forced prostitution that is the hallmark of Japanese occupation. But the fight against Japan continues. Tens of thousands of Philippine guerrilla fighters, backed by the U.S., the British Commonwealth, and the Philippine government in exile, as well as the anti-U.S. communists of Hukbalahap, with roughly 70,000 members, continue the war under occupation. They carry out sabotage missions, raids against Japanese military installations, assassinations, and intercept shipments of food and supplies, to which the Japanese react with brutal repression and capital punishment for anyone, even just remotely associated with these groups. While they fight the Axis from the inside in the Eastern Hemisphere, on the other side of Eurasia, others do the same. In Italian-occupied Albania, the Germans are now taking over after Mussolini's removal. On August 12th, 200 militants carry out an ambush on German troops of the 1st Alpine Division near the village of Kurtis. The Albanians inflict heavy casualties on the Germans, destroying a towed 88mm field gun, 4 trucks, and killing around 35 soldiers without a single casualty on their own side. The group is Bali Kombetar, with support from the British Special Operations Executive and their agent on the ground, David Smiley. Now, anticipating the German takeover, the SOE have been contacting local resistance groups to bring them together into a unified force against the Axis occupation of the Balkan Peninsula. The Bali Kombetar is made up of ultranationalist anti-communists, with many members being landowners. But SOE has recently forged them into an unholy alliance with the Communist National Liberation Movement. At the beginning of the month, the groups met at Mukje. Despite the ideological incompatibilities, both groups want to establish a greater Albanian ethnic nation-state, including Kosovo. With that common goal in mind, they are now together the Committee of National Salvation. But now, after only 2 weeks of unity, despite the success at Kurtis, the committee falls apart when the Communist parties of Yugoslavia and Albania jointly denounce the accord as counter-revolutionary. Their argument is that their motivations are ethnic and will sow discord and division, calling it nothing more than a fascist tool. The ambush on the German occupiers in Albania is not the only one on German occupiers on that day. Many kilometers to the north, Polish fighters of the Armia Krajowa, the Home Army, carry out Operation Goral, a money transport heist. Resistance requires money, lots of it, but the Polish government in exile can only smuggle in so much. Luckily, the German occupiers also need money, lots of it. So they're constantly moving large amounts of cash to and from the Bank of Issue in Warsaw using armed transport. To tap that source, a specifically created resistance cell, Motor 30, has been preparing for months. It goes pretty much as you expect a heist on a money transport should go. A few militiamen block off a road pretending to be doing road repairs, forcing the unsuspecting transport to turn into a narrow street. There, dozens of armed militia members are ready for the truck and its guards. Since it's wartime and you don't really have to wear kid gloves when robbing transports, they simply open fire, spraying the truck with bullets and killing half of the 12 guards. The rest surrender, and the operatives drive off with the truck to a safe house to count their bounty. And what a bounty it is. The Home Army operatives walk away with about 106 million zlotys, roughly $27 million in 2022 purchase value. The Germans are furious, of course, but it feels to them uncannily like a simple criminal heist, and the usual retaliation against civilians doesn't follow. But they will surely come for some other reason in the next few days, for such is the nature of Axis occupation in this war. A war that will soon enter its 5th year. 5 years of unprecedented carnage. A war that very few believe makes any sense anymore, it seems, if it made sense in the first place. This week, though, it seems that many, perhaps most, have come to that conclusion, at least in Europe. The Italians want out. The Germans don't think they can win anymore. Even Adolf Hitler has given up on offense and started to prepare for defense. In the Balkans, they're already quibbling about post-war borders. And let's not kid ourselves. No matter what it looks like, there are no United Nations allied commanders at this point who aren't at least fairly certain that Germany, and whatever allies she still has left, will be defeated. The question is just how, and how fast is it going to happen, and how many people have to die before it's over? The answer is no one knows how or when, and many, many more will die, because no matter what it may look like, this war is far from over. It has just entered into a new phase. Now they are fighting for what shall be the world order once it's over. And again, let's not kid ourselves. As we saw in Albania this week, the Axis opposition has no unity on that question. The Nazis? Well, they seem to still be fighting to preserve the core of their ideology, kill as many Jews and other imagined enemies as possible, and establish a pure Germany based on racial fantasies, or go down trying. And even if they already murdered millions, there are still millions more within their reach. The Soviets may be fighting fascism, but they're also fighting to impose on the world a different murderous ideology that carries the name of their leader. It doesn't look much different in the Far East, with Japan pretending that the Greater Asian Coast prosperity idea is a real thing, while still exploiting local populations to death. While the U.S. may finally have granted the Philippines their rights to sovereignty, the situation in Bengal, by the leader of Great Britain's own words, is a result of preserving the British Empire at any cost. And so, we have come full circle. We began this terrible chapter in human history because some people, many people, thought it was a good idea to use violence to impose their ideology on others, to take by force what they could not earn by merit, and to dispose of those they felt stood in their way. And now, as we stand on the ruins of cities, walk on ground covered with the ashes of millions of our own kind, it is still unclear if the rule of the world shall be through exceptionalism or inclusion, and if life shall be defined by the rights of the individual or a select collective subset. Not any side in this war stands firmly for one or the other. Not any side of this war is ready yet to yield. Not any side of this war has killed enough to satiate their thirst for revenge. And on both sides, there are forces seeking to secure their perceived rights by ideology, race, or nationality at someone else's cost, even life. Woeful is a world so steeped in ideologies of division, for in such a world, the filthy dogs of war, the parasitic worms of oppression, the trampling beasts of destruction, and the maggots of death will always prosper. Never forget.